If you want to understand the meaning of Christmas, you have to know a little about history. You've got to understand the history of one particular nation, the nation of Israel. In order to understand the meaning of Joseph and Mary and baby Jesus and the shepherds and the wise men and jingle bells, you need to know the history of Israel. Because context is everything. So, let me give you the Coles notes of the history of Israel. In 2000 BC, God actually appeared to a shepherd who was in a place that we would call now southern Iraq. And we know his name was, we know it today as Abraham. Now you imagine that, you're out there in Iraq tending sheep and God suddenly appeared to you. Now, he probably hasn't appeared to you directly, hasn't maybe appeared to me directly, but he appeared to this man, Abraham, in such a way that it changed Abraham's life. And God said to him, if you travel west and you do what I tell you to do, you'll prosper and your descendants will become a great nation and everything will go well for you. So Abraham travelled west from Iraq towards Israel, what we know today is Israel, Canaan. But Abraham didn't obey God, things didn't go well for him, and his descendants went really bad for them. And so, around about 1800 BC, God revealed himself to another man. This time a man that we know as Jacob. And he was now one of Abraham's descendants, and he was living in the land of Israel where Abraham had moved. Imagine that. If God revealed himself directly to you in such a way that it was unmistakable, that you knew it was God. It'd be pretty hard to stand before him saying, you know what, I don't believe in you. And he's just appeared to you. And he talks to you. He says, if you do what I tell you, you will prosper and your descendants will become a great nation and everything will go really well for you. Well, of course, Jacob didn't obey God and things didn't go well for him and his descendants. The whole family of Jacob ended up in Egypt in slavery. That was 2000 BC, then 1800 BC. 1400 BC, God reveals himself to one of Abraham's descendants again, this time a guy that you and I know by the name of Moses. And he lived probably in the modern city that we call Port Said in Egypt on the Mediterranean. Imagine that. God revealed himself to this man. And the man paid attention because God's standing right in front of him. It's pretty hard to deny God when he's standing right in front of you. And he said to Moses, if you do what I tell you, you will prosper and your descendants will become a great nation and things will go really well for you. Well, Moses didn't obey God and things didn't go well for him and his descendants. And Moses and his descendants spent many years wandering around in the desert living as nomads. So then in about 1000 BC, God revealed himself to another man. This time we know him as King David. And God revealed to him that David was born in Bethlehem, which is a town we still know today, exists today. And so God revealed himself to another one of Abraham's descendants in Bethlehem, a guy named David. Imagine how you'd feel if you're just there in this little town and God revealed himself to you. It's hard to not believe in God if he's standing right in front of you. I don't believe in you. Well, I didn't believe in you, but... And so God said to David, if you do what I tell you, you will prosper and your descendants will become a great nation and things will go really well for you. Guess what David did? He didn't obey God. And things didn't go well for him and his descendants. In fact, David lived through war all his life. His nation divided, civil war. And then in 722 BC, the great nation of Assyria, which we know as northern Iraq, came and plundered David's kingdom. He invaded Abraham's descendants and took them into captivity. 200 years later, in 586, Babylon, which is in central Iraq, took the rest of Abraham's descendants and they lived in captivity. So far, every time God appears to somebody, it didn't go very well. Now, you might say, well, if God appeared to me, I'd be different. Oh, really? So all of these people throughout history, God appeared to them in a way that's just, you can't explain it, but he was just there and they disobeyed him. But if God would appear to me, then it'd be different. All I need is just absolute proof that God would appear to me. So in 4 BC, God revealed himself to one of Abraham's descendants in the town of Bethlehem. Imagine that God would reveal himself to you in a personal form. And he would say, if you do what I tell you, you'll prosper and things will go really well for you. Oh, wait. Yes, of course. That's why we're here. That's why we celebrate Christmas. Because God revealed himself to the whole human race. Little baby. Are you kidding me? God revealing himself to the whole human race with a little baby? Yeah, that's why we have Christmas. That's why you come to church. You thought it was because of family and stuff. No, because God revealed himself to the human race. Again. And he grew up and he became a man and he showed us how to live our lives to get right with God. If you do what I tell you, you will have true quality of life and you'll live forever, said Jesus. Now, here's the amazing thing. During the time of our Bible reading that Rita read to us, that was when the nation of Assyria, 700 BC, was taking over Israel. And things were not going very well. Israel was under occupation. Most powerful nation of the world had taken over Israel. Assyria, that was back then, 700. And the prophet said that people were living in gloom and people were in distress. There were people walking around in darkness and people living in total darkness. You imagine if there was another nation occupying Canada. Could be Russia, could be China, could be Australia, could be Malta. Or it might be something that's much more insidious. And you look around and you see your nation with people who are depressed and living in anxiety, and morality's gone out the door and ethics have gone out the door. People living in utter hopelessness. Hang on a minute, that sounds like the world we live in. Now the question is for tonight, I wonder if that's you. The prophet said a baby would be born in Bethlehem 700 years later, He would be God in human form. He would be a descendant of Abraham, and his name would be called God amongst us, or God with us, God saves. His name in English would be Jesus. So let me just leave you with this thought after we've had a quick history lesson. Throughout the human race, the history of the human race, God's been revealing himself to people. And he says this one basic message. If you do what I tell you, you'll prosper, and your descendants will become a great nation, and things will go well for you. Christmas is the time when we think about an historical event where God is revealing himself to his people. Now, this might not apply to you, but if it does, then take it for what it's worth. There are people way back then when Isaiah wrote, just like today, there are people living in distress. You can't go through 2 years of COVID and shutdowns and mandates and not see the results of people living in distress, people living with depression and anxiety. You've read all the statistics, you know about it. I wonder if some of you are here tonight. People living in gloom. There's a dark cloud hanging over you. No matter where you go, it's just impossible to make sense of the world around you. And if you want to know the country that's invaded Canada, it's the digital country. You and I, many of us are addicted to the digital syringe. And there are people living in gloom. Just like the prophet Isaiah said, they are walking around in darkness. People have totally lost their moral and ethical compass. Hey, listen, I'm a pastor. I deal with people all the time. I go into people's homes that you've probably never been to. And on the outside, we're all dressed nice and we've got suit and tie on. And you go inside and look inside the home, people are really struggling. Life is really, really tough. Now, you can't be honest with people because nobody really interested anyway, but people are lost. We don't know what's right. We don't know what's wrong. We don't know what's left. We don't know what's right. We don't know up, down, light, dark. We've got no idea anymore. Now, this doesn't probably apply to you, but for many of the people I minister to, it does. The people are living in darkness. I'll tell you how you know when you're living in darkness. You've lost all sense of hope. And the only thing that keeps you going are your addictions. Oh my goodness. You see, the world that we live in is just like the world of Israel before it was invaded by the big Assyrian army and then the Babylonian army. We've lost all sense of orientation. Nobody's got any idea what's going on. You don't honestly believe that stuff you see on the TV, do you? Who believes that stuff anymore? It's almost impossible. One says A, one says B. Can't both be right. So, if you're like the people of Israel and you're struggling with life and you're trying to make sense of life, if that's you, maybe God is revealing himself to you tonight. Maybe he's trying to say to you, if you do what I tell you, and if you follow my guidelines, you'll prosper and things will go really, really well for you. Well, it's better than the alternative. Why do you need a survival kit when you can have a battle plan? So, we've learned from history. The one thing we learn from history is we never learn anything from history. We've learned from history that most people never obey God. And things don't go well for them. But Isaiah made a promise that people have been following for thousands of years. If you're living in darkness, if you're walking in darkness, here's the promise. A child was born for you and for me. Now, he grew up and he became a man. He was God in human form, and the prophet said he would be the mighty counselor. You need advice? He can do it. He's got all the advice you need. He's got everything under control. One God, one true God for all gods. He's your everlasting Father. If you need someone to love you, not like your father. Some of you probably didn't have a very good relationship with your father. About 50% of you probably. But if you could take the ideal father who loves you and cares for you, protects you, gives you your identity. Have you ever thought about that? Your identity is not in your sexuality, it's not in your job, it's not in your personality, it's in God. You were created by God. You're really special. Amazing. And he's the Prince of Peace. You know why they call him the Prince of Peace? Because you can get a peace from God that the world cannot give you. It's not the cessation of hostility. It's a peace that doesn't make sense. It's a peace that you can have in spite of your world's, life's circumstances. It don't matter what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. God can still give you peace. It doesn't matter what happens, whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. God can still give you peace. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. God can give you peace. You'll never find peace in those things. But the Prince of Peace. So could I urge you in closing not to be like the descendants of Abraham? They didn't obey God and things didn't go well for them. So tonight, as you think about your state of affairs, where you're at, where your life's at, I want to suggest to you, if you've never done this before, never considered it, maybe you should consider the reality of the words of what Jesus actually said. It could change your life. It could give you meaning and peace and purpose, and it would help you navigate the crazy world we live in. Maybe you might consider that.